Check, check. Hello. Buenos dias. Good morning. Is everybody doing well? We're here again, day 2. Wow. Take a nice big deep breath or don't. I'm not really a fan of being told what to do, so you don't have to either. To everybody here, welcome back. I'm Walker. It's nice to see you again. To everybody in the live stream, hello. You're here in our hearts. As McShane mentioned, if you are on the live stream and you have questions today, go ahead and type them on in there. Carla's going to be our in-person interpreter, speaking your questions to the speaker here on stage. And without further ado, let's go ahead and get going. So John is the founder of Mi Primer Bitcoin. If you haven't been down to El Salvador, I highly recommend it. We ended up going once and then coming back within the space of a couple of months for adopting Bitcoin. We apparently just couldn't stay away. And it's amazing what they are doing down there. And Mi Primer Bitcoin is one of the most just inspiring initiatives that is taking place down there. So I'd like everybody to give a very warm day 2 welcome to John. He's going to take us off talking about Bitcoin 101 and maybe the Bitcoin 101 revolution. So give John a warm welcome.
Hello. Good morning. Thank you, Walker. Thank you all the organizers, everybody at this event. This is my favorite Bitcoin conference that I've been to. I'm barefoot, which I love. I did not even take shoes with me today, and I have never been to a conference where that is acceptable, so I'm really happy about that. And with that in mind, I'm also going to do something new for me, something different. I did not prepare anything. I'm just going to speak from the heart. And I don't know how long that's going to take. So there's going to be questions at the end of an undetermined amount of time. And I know this is titled Bitcoin 101. I am not going to talk about how to set up a wallet, how to make your first transaction. What I am going to talk about today is how Bitcoin could be a tool to change the world. Bitcoin is a tool to change everything, right? So if people here aren't familiar with Mi Primer Bitcoin, I think it makes sense to start at the present. So Mi Primer Bitcoin is a Bitcoin education nonprofit. We're based in El Salvador. Our focus is El Salvador, but our mission is the world. We believe that El Salvador is the most important place in the world right now because it is the first country to adopt Bitcoin. So whatever happens there will set a precedent. Whatever happens there will be an example for the rest of the world to follow. We get to decide what sort of example that is. And that's why we believe that education is so important, because that creates the foundation of a positive example. So we target people who are brand new to Bitcoin. That's why we're called Mi Primer Bitcoin, or My First Bitcoin. And we have intro classes. We also developed a Bitcoin diploma, which we teach in the public school system, and also some community centers around there. And just to give an idea of the growth, because I'm really proud of it. I'm really proud of the team. There's some people here, Dax and Napoleon, Marcela. We began in 2021, and we had 400 students in 2021, which we were pretty happy with. And then last year in 2022, we had over 10,000 students. So that's a 25x growth year over year. And I firmly believe that we will continue that trajectory. So that means 250,000 students this year, 6.25 million next year, and then 150 million after that. And I want to tell you how we're going to do that and why we need to do that. But now I'm going to go to the beginning. I'm going to go back in time a little bit. Talk about why Mi Primer Bitcoin, why this began. So I'm from New York originally, and I was there when the pandemic began. And again, I'm going to take a note from this conference where I'm able to be barefoot. This is not something that a story that I would normally tell, or the way that I would normally tell it, but I'm going to go out on a limb with this one. So I'm from New York, and I was there when the pandemic began. And it was crazy. It was as clear as ever to me that the world was broken, that we were on a path that was unsustainable, that we had stopped thinking for ourselves. So I took a lot of time, took a lot of long walks, took a lot of psychedelics, and took long walks, and thought about the world and how it was broken. And it was actually very depressing until I started to think about Bitcoin. And I started to think about, well, once the problem is identified, then you could work on the solution. And the problem was as clear as ever. And the problem was that people didn't have agency in their own lives. So the solution, at a certain moment, it just clicked. The solution was Bitcoin. And more than Bitcoin, it was introducing people to Bitcoin in the right way. So not introducing to Bitcoin as like Binance Academy, right? Not introducing Bitcoin as a way to make more dollars. Not introducing Bitcoin as a way to mimic the system that we're trying to replace. So I've also lived in Latin America a good chunk of my adult life. I've spent 5 years in Ecuador, and I went back to Ecuador in the latter part of the pandemic, and I tried to encourage people to teach their community about Bitcoin there. The price was up. I gave some sats to some people for them to teach their friends and their community, and it didn't really take off. We tried it. It didn't take off. I thought, well, there's another way. Shortly after that, El Salvador announced that they were adopting Bitcoin. And that was another moment that just clicked. Like, okay, Ecuador is not the place for it right now. El Salvador is the place. So I went to El Salvador. I met some really amazing people. Just very, very quick personal aside, Napoleon here, he was literally my Uber driver, like one of the first days in the country. And I asked if I could pay with Bitcoin, and he was very curious about it. He became our first student, and now he's our community builder, an incredible teacher. Like it's an example of how Bitcoin can transform people and empower them. He quit Uber, runs his own Bitcoin first taxi service now. So, yeah. Round of applause for Napoleon. Okay. So now this is the good part. Now this is the future, right? We've talked about the present, we've talked about the past, and now we get to talk about the future. I don't believe that I do believe that Bitcoin will win. I'm not sure how it will win. I don't think that we could sit back and allow it to to let others decide, right? That's the whole point of Bitcoin is we get to decide, right? Same with Nostra. Nostra is also, along the same lines, like this is a very big puzzle, and they're both big parts of it, right? Like free communication, free money, free mind. So again, I think there's a lot of reason for pessimism in the world, right? Like look at what's happening with the banks collapsing, and it's not just the banks are collapsing; it's that we don't get to decide. Someone else decides for us. So I do believe that Bitcoin will win. That is determined. That is predestined. What we get to decide is how it wins. And that is the important part. So the best way to predict the future is to create it. And the reason why Bitcoin is so important for the world is because it allows us to make our own choices. So in the world that we live in, money and power are synonymous. So if you control someone's money, you control their power. And it has such profound effects. It's not about money. It is about money, but it's about so much more. It's about power, right? It's about who gets to decide not just our life, but our world. What is the sort of world that we want to live in? Do we even think about that? Maybe in this room we do, but I think outside of this room, by and large, we don't, because we live in a world in which others decide for us. We live in a world in which others decide how we could spend our money. We live in a world in which others decide how much money there is, how much it's worth. And that limits our intellectual capacity. Because if we live in a world where others decide for us, and again, it's not just about money, it's about everything, it's about power. If we live in a world where others decide for us, then we forget how to dream, right? We forget how to imagine, we forget how to create. Because we also don't have responsibility. If you lose your password to your bank account, you could contact the bank and they could, restore your account. Because it's not really yours, right? Because they always have it. They always have access to it. They always control it. They decide whether you could use it or not you. And because you don't have that responsibility, we live in a world in which we're not allowed to make mistakes. We're not allowed to make mistakes because we don't have that responsibility, right? Like if there's a problem with the bank, if there's a problem with whatever, then it's just rolled back. And because we don't have responsibility, that means that because we're not allowed to make mistakes, it means that we don't learn. We have to fail in order to learn. And we're not allowed to fail, right? We're not allowed to touch the fire and know that it's hot. Which means that we don't develop those skills. We don't find new ways. We don't evolve intellectually. I would rather fail at trying to change the world than succeed at conforming to it. We are not here to entrench the status quo. That's a good correction. We are not here to entrench the status quo. We're here to overthrow it. And it's so important that when people take their first step into this world, into this revolution, that they follow these philosophies and ethics, right? This is the first step. So if we our philosophy at Meet From Our Bitcoin, we put a lot of emphasis and a lot of value on independence and impartiality. Because if the goal is to empower people to think for themselves, we can't dictate to them, right? We can't tell them how to think. That's what's wrong with the world, is we are constantly told how to think. Not that we are told how, it's not a suggestion. And it's really important that people start their journey on the right track. And then that leads to other things, right? Like Bitcoin is a Trojan horse. Bitcoin education is a Trojan horse. It is not money. It is money, but it is so much more than that. It is so much deeper than that. It is power. It's agency in our own lives. So I have no idea how long that was, but I'd like to take some questions and continue on whatever path the questions dictate. Yeah.
Peace. Why do you think El Salvador was the first country to adopt it, and what indications have you seen from other parts of the world that they are paying attention to how that's being rolled out down there?
Yeah. So why was El Salvador the first country to adopt it? This is a paradigm shift, right? Like everything is about to change. And the people who are going to be at the forefront of the change, people, countries, whatever, are going to be the ones that have the least advantage from the current system. El Salvador is a small country that doesn't have its own currency, right? They dollarized in 2000 or 2000. So like, during the pandemic or even now or constantly, the US inflates the monetary supply and they get all of the benefit, right? They get, in the US we have inflation too, but El Salvador only gets inflation, right? They don't get more money injected into the economy. That gets injected somewhere else. So the people who will be first in line to change the world are the ones who had the least advantage from the old one. It's also a small country, so I think that leads to more risk taken. So El Salvador makes sense to me as the first country. And the next countries, I almost don't want to try to, but people are paying attention. People are very much paying attention. So back to the beginning, Ecuador. So I kind of had a layover in Ecuador on my way here, and I met a lot of the same people that I talked to 2 years ago about Bitcoin, because I wanted to get something going with Bitcoin education. And this, mind you, was when the market was just starting to go up, which should be when people are the most interested, right? And now is probably maybe not for us, but maybe for people on the outside, this is probably a less optimistic time for Bitcoin because the price has gone down basically since then. Even with that, talking to many of the same people, I tried really hard 2 years ago to get people interested in Bitcoin so they could teach others. Now I didn't try at all, and people were approaching me like, hey, I want to teach people about Bitcoin. What do I do? Like, how do I get started? Because Ecuador, people recognize that the world is not headed in the right direction. And this is a lifeboat. This is an alternative. So again, I think the next countries will be countries that don't benefit from the way the world works right now. I don't think it's going to be the United States. I don't think it's going to be Switzerland, right? It's going to be an Ecuador. It's going to be, Guatemala or Paraguay, or it's going to be a similar profile to El Salvador, I think.
I'm just curious, after the experience in El Salvador, do you feel that it's necessary the other countries turn it into a central bank and make it legal tender, or just make it legal to use?
I don't think any of that is necessary, because we are very fortunate to work in a country where it is legal tender. That eliminates a lot of the roadblocks. So we're really happy that exists, that El Salvador made that move, but it's not necessary. And in fact, long term, I'm happy that there's a variety of different tactics and ways for Bitcoin adoption around the world, because again, we need to fail, right? We need to try things. So El Salvador tries one thing, another country tries another, a third tries a third way, and that's how we figure out what's best, right? Like, there is no one solution. So
I totally agree with you. My name's Jimmy, and I came here to meet you. So
great.
I live in Mexico, and I want to take it to Mexico big time this year. And so, yeah, we can talk later.
And to follow up on that, thank you, Jimmy, and I'm really excited to talk to you after this. This is an idea whose time has come. So going back to, this is the problem when you don't prepare a speech, right? You forget to say some things. I talked about the numbers before, and this year 250,000, next year 6.25 million, the year after that 150 million, right? That's the goal. And I'm actually quite confident that we could do that. And how we could do that, El Salvador is a small country, population 6 or 7 million, so the numbers don't match up. And the way we're going to do that is with people like Jimmy here from Mexico. So about 2 weeks ago, I almost hesitate to say this. Okay, I've begun. About 2 weeks ago, we did a bit of a reorganization within the project, and we created a new department, which is international expansion. Since that happened, literally every day, people have reached out to me or reached out to us from different places in the world. It's like, hey, me and a few of my friends, we want to do what's happening in El Salvador in our own community. How can we do that? Do you guys have like a toolkit or something? So as soon as we started developing that toolkit, then people started reaching out to us. And it's again, like, so much credit to the community, so much credit to the team. But I also have this very deep feeling that this is simply an idea whose time has come. It is happening in people's minds all around the world, right, at the same time. And we have this massive, massive opportunity to change the course of human civilization, right? Like there's quite different paths that we could take from here. And the path that involves educating people about how to take control of their own lives and open their minds to new ideas and have agency is the path that I want, right? And it's the path that so many other people want. And the great thing about that is that there's so many people that want to take that initiative. And it is, I would be, again, in the beginning, I was quite pessimistic about the world. The world seemed broken. I'm extremely optimistic about the world now.
John, can you hear me?
Yes.
Right here.
Oh, yeah. Sorry.
Thank you so much for starting that program and kicking it off and sharing it with the world. That's huge, and making it open for people to contribute and take it other places. Could you talk a little bit about how you were able to get it into the schools, the age of the children that you're teaching, and do they come out like that's just another course I completed, or are they really engaged at the end and proud of their accomplishment by getting the certificate or whatever you give them at the end of the program?
Yeah, great question. I'm really happy with this Q&A part because these are all great things that I forgot to talk about. So again, I want to say this is an idea whose time has come, right? Like I often feel like I am and we are at the will of forces far greater than us. So we have never, not once have we approached a school. They've approached us. And in fact, there's a line of people that want this in El Salvador, because we literally are doubling the Bitcoin diploma program every 10 weeks. That's how long the course is, and that's basically how that's how fast we could grow with keeping the quality high, and we can't keep up. We can't keep up with the demand. So another great thing about Bitcoin, and another reason why I have so much hope, why Mi Primer Bitcoin gives me so much hope in the future of the world, is proof of work. So we live in a proof of stake world, right? We want to live in a proof of work world. And I see that. Basically, our philosophy was to just do good work and things will happen. And that's essentially what did happen. So now we began teaching just in a high school. That was the first place was in a high school. So the students were age, I'll say 15 to 18, in that range. And that is still the majority of our students for the Bitcoin diploma. So for the intro classes, they're open so it's any range. But for the Bitcoin diploma, and we do have open Bitcoin diploma classes. We have a house now in San Salvador, which we use as an office and also an education center. We'll have another house in the near future in the second largest city of the country, San Miguel. And we'll do the same there. We also work with some mayor's offices and do it out of city halls, which are open. But again, the main thing is still in the school system, still that age, like 15 to 18 years old. And they're really great because they don't have to unlearn a lot of stuff, right? They're quite open to new things. They're not yet entrenched in the world that we're trying to replace. So what we do at the end of the course, so it's a 10-week course, and the final week we verify that they have sufficient knowledge to graduate. And the way that we verify that is just a couple of simple tests. They have to create a wallet, write down the seed phrase, destroy the wallet, restore it on another device, make a transaction, find it on chain, and explain what's happening with the transaction. And then if they want to start, explain it to someone else who doesn't know about Bitcoin. And then we bring people in there to help us verify, people from around the world. Some of them live in El Salvador, but we also invite people from other places. Our next big graduation will be in May, shortly before Bitcoin Miami. If anybody wants to come to El Salvador, 1, you should come to El Salvador. 2, that's a great time to come. So I'll just plug that. Follow us on Twitter to find more details about that. But the students, because people come from faraway places, and they sit down with them one-on-one to verify that they have sufficient knowledge. And then, we have a ceremony where they play the national anthem and they get a certificate and all that, and it is so powerful. I believe at every ceremony so far, at least one of the students has cried. As they accept the diploma, they're giving hugs to everyone, their families are often there, because we tell them, and this is true, this is absolutely true, that they will change the world, that they are the first generation, that they are an example. Right, that what happens there, what happens with them, not even El Salvador, but this specific class, this specific group of students, is going to have a huge impact, right? Because they are setting precedents, they are setting examples, and they feel that, and it's really amazing to see. So many of these students become teachers then, right? It transforms them. Many of our teachers now were students in the Bitcoin diploma that just got orange pilled and that's all they want to do now. So yeah, those are always amazing days and events.
Hi, John.
Hey.
Could you please share the learning curve students go through, particularly the adults, and how you where are the friction points? Where are the concepts or things that the students tend to struggle with the most, and how you guys help them through that?
Yeah. So this is it's a bit strange, or maybe counterintuitive, but I think what people struggle with most with Bitcoin, and again, we're targeting people who are brand new to the space, and not necessarily technical people, right? Bitcoin is digital. What we have found works really well is to show rather than tell. So the way that we do that, we do explain the theory and the concepts. In fact, we first explain the world that we live in, right? So of the 10-week course, the first 3 weeks, we don't talk about Bitcoin at all. We talk about the existing financial system. What is money? Why is money? How have we arrived at this point? Centralization versus decentralization. And then we get into Bitcoin. But with everything that we do, we try to make it as interactive as possible, because people, one of the roadblocks for a lot of people who are brand new to Bitcoin is that because it's digital, because they can't see it, because they can't hold it in their hands, it's difficult for them to understand, because again, it's a paradigm shift. That's not what we're used to. We're used to tangible things. So a big part of what we do is we try to make the intangible real. And we do that a variety of different ways. And I think maybe a good way to explain that is not the diploma, but the way that we format our meetups, which again are targeted at Salvadorians who are new to the space. Other meetups might give like a drink ticket, right? So we give a little bit of Bitcoin, and we negotiate a discount if you pay with Bitcoin at whoever is hosting the meetup. And we encourage them to make a Bitcoin transaction. Not in the classes, they make Bitcoin transactions, right? Like we send them sats, they send it to their peers. But we encourage them, we incentivize them to make a Bitcoin transaction in the real world, right? And once they do, almost all of them have an aha moment where they're like, did I do it? Did I just use Bitcoin? That's it? Like that is very often the reaction. That's it? Like it's much easier than people think, and people have a hard time, again, people new to the space I think have a hard time conceptualizing what Bitcoin is if it's just theoretical. So we do our best to show rather than tell whenever we can.
Yeah, I thought I'd add something to that. I come from Amsterdam and I smoke a lot of weed, so I spend a lot of time in coffee shops. And these people are always very interested, but very stoned. So I figured maybe that's a good way to, like, if I can explain to these people how it works. And I ended up using like a schrift, what do you call it? Piece of a notebook, exact, thank you. I'm a bit tired. A notebook where one page would be a block and someone is keeping the thing, and we use simplified sort of proof of work with dice rolling. And after like basically role-playing sort of the network, and we did this importantly after them actually doing a transaction, which actually Nostr was the thing that made it click for them, seeing like, oh, I can sell my whatever on on the network. So then after using it, we did this sort of role play thing, and this really worked well. So it's something I figured out a couple of weeks ago, and haven't really turned it into a format, but it's nice to try. So it's a one page, and they understand like, oh, money does not come out of thin air. There's actually a thing like Coinbase. They figure out that the system adds up everything so that everything sums up to zero, etc. So it was very nice. Like they don't really need to understand it, but once they did, they were like, oh, this is so simple actually. So yeah, I thought I'd give a comment on that.
Yeah, that's awesome. That sounds great. And you know, let's see if that works for our students. I'd love to talk to you afterwards. Yeah, so like another example of what we do is to demonstrate the coincidence of double wants, which is a reason why we have money in the first place. That means that you know, I have this badge, and he has that phone. And he wants to trade his phone, I want to trade my badge, but we don't want the same thing, so we have to find like an intermediary, and that's essentially what money is. But again, instead of explaining that, which maybe doesn't make a lot of sense how I just said it if you're not familiar with the concept, we give students pieces of paper with things that they have that they want to trade and things that they want, and somebody else in the class has it, and they have to just go to the person next to them to try to get it. And you know, it's a way for them to discover the inefficiencies of that system and why money makes sense rather than just like trade in objects, right? But to have that interactive activity clicks for a lot of people. We have interactive activities to explain the relationship between miners and holders and spenders and all that as well. And we're always developing more. And one of the things that we want to do is when we encourage others to start Bitcoin education projects in their own community, part of the motivation of that is we want to share best practices and we want to share resources, not as a one-way street, not as us sharing it with others, but everyone sharing it with everyone, right? To create this open network, because we don't all have to reinvent the wheel. Like if you figured something out that works in a coffee shop in Amsterdam, then we want to speed the rate of which that information is shared with others, right? Yeah. So the Bitcoin diploma is open source. We have it in Spanish and English. The English one came out, I think, at the start of this month, which is the first time that we've actually had it in English. We also have translations. So I know people are translating it. This is from the community. This isn't what we're doing. But I'm aware that it's being translated into Portuguese, French, Turkish, Italian, and I don't know what else. But like this is just in the past 2 weeks. We anticipate it will probably be in about 10 languages by the end of the year. But yeah, it's all open source. You can find it on our GitHub, also on our webpage, which is myfirstbitcoin.io. And we want to create more materials and open source more materials. This is just a start.
Hi, my name's Carlos. With the rate of change of like what Bitcoin's becoming, new technologies, how do you keep the program? Is there continuing like education? I mean, 3 years ago to now, explaining to a friend like where Lightning has gone, for example, how do you incorporate that into like the education program and keep up? Unlike algebra that's stayed the same for 1,000 years.
Yeah. So the Bitcoin diploma, the first graduating class was in June of last year. So it's been less than a year, and we're on our 4th edition. So it's 10 weeks long, the course. So essentially every 10 weeks we have like a new wave of students. And what we had done was actually create a new curriculum every 10 weeks. Because in the beginning, we were moving as fast as we could, and we were conscious that because we didn't have feedback yet from students, we would have to make a lot of changes in the beginning. We're pretty confident with it now, so it's more stable. We're not going to change it every 10 weeks because it's not very efficient. We have to pay designers every time, and so we're going to do it once a year. So the update will be once a year, but then beyond that, there's other ways if people want to learn about what happened yesterday in Bitcoin, right? Like that's not what we do. But we could keep them, quite up to date, but not if there's a new innovation yesterday. Yeah, I mean, ordinals are in the book that was released this month. Like a paragraph, right? Not there's not a big part of that, but that it exists, right?
Thank you, John, for coming here. I'm a Tico Bitcoiner. I'm here with a lot of friends who are Tico Bitcoiners as well, and we are inspired by your proof of work, by your leadership. I do believe, as I told you, that your organization is the more important driver of Bitcoin adoption in the world, because education is adoption, right? And with that in mind, I want to share with everybody here that we Bitcoiners, Tico's Bitcoiners, friends from Costa Rica, we wanted to do something, so we create, and this is the first time I am announcing it, the Bitcoin Association from Costa Rica, and so we want to focus on education, collaboration, privacy, self-custody, all the Bitcoin values, and we just feel like you inspired us. Also, the circular economy we have here, and in El Salvador, Guatemala, and so everything, like as you said, like you are, everybody is taking advantage of each other's work, and that is how open networks work. This is how Nostr works too. So thank you, and looking forward to cooperate with you in the future.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you. And that's, again, I just want to restate, this is an idea whose time has come. Right, I've spoken with them, a really great group of people that want to push forward Bitcoin education here in Costa Rica, in Mexico and so many other places. Like it's all happening at the same time. and we're stronger together than we are apart. And I think the great thing, not the great thing, a great thing about Bitcoin as opposed to fiat. In fiat, the incentive system encourages competition. In Bitcoin, it encourages cooperation. And that's why we'll win.
Maybe I have time for one more quick question here. Anyone?
I was just wondering, what's like your long-term vision for the future? Like, in terms of, I guess, helping people apply Bitcoin to do things like start a business. Would you ever consider becoming like an incubator of people who were trying to, I guess maybe not necessarily provide funding, but provide like a framework or means or something?
Yeah, good question. The answer is yes and no. So the answer is yes, in that we want to work with others that do that, and you know, we're currently forming relationships with people or projects or groups that could take people further, that could take people beyond that. But for us, the answer is no, because I think it's important that we have a massive geographic ambition, right? The world, literally the world. So because of that, we have to have quite a narrow focus on what we do. And the focus is independent, impartial, community-led Bitcoin education for people new to the space. And I really believe that it's important that we keep that narrow focus. If we try to do everything for everyone, that's a good way to do nothing for no one. So we want to work with others that do that, but we're conscious that if we want to spread this around the world, then we have to keep that narrow focus. Okay, so I think that wraps it up. Thank you so much for being here and listening, and I have hope in the world because of this. So thank you.
That was fantastic, John. You know, it's kind of funny. You never see any grassroots efforts to educate people about the fiat system. Like, there's no central bankers out there putting together these workshops and community-led efforts to make sure that people really understand how our current monetary system works, because, of course, if people did understand, there would be riots tomorrow, and there might be anyway. But I have so much hope for the world because of people like John, because of people like Napo, who was the first face that we saw when we got off the plane in El Salvador. And when we got there, he was accepting Bitcoin. And I don't know, it's an amazing thing to see this effort spread. And so thank you, John, because what you do is incredible. Appreciate you.